What's up, friends? Welcome back to another episode of NFT 365. And we talk a lot about utility on this podcast. We talk a lot about, value and use cases, but I don't think we do a great job of breaking down some of the categories that are already kind of popping and really proving value, but aren't in the traditional, just I would say, community or PFP or gaming aspect. And excited to have my co-host Travie on the podcast. He is the host of Fired Up on the Blockchain, the podcast. He's also a real close friend of mine now here in this amazing Web3 space. He's the founder of the Journey, which is also a project that I am very blessed to be advising and working with him on. And Travie, whenever you and I were going to jam out for this episode, and I was like, man, someone that like has their finger on the pulse when it comes to music NFTs, your love for music. We spend a lot of time geeking out over our love for music as a whole, and then also just kind of your love for art. I will say, for those that don't know, it wasn't really until you and I connected that I got as much exposed to as much one of one art and artists in the space. Like I was pretty naive to a lot of the one of one art, like understanding what people were doing, with some of the values, some of the nuances there. And of course, now being a part of OG Collective. So, Travie, thanks for coming back on, doing another co-host spot. And yeah, excited to kind of talk a little bit about, music, art, NFTs. We'll talk a little bit about some projects that we both love. But yeah, thanks for jumping back on.
Great to be back here, of course. Fired up to be with you as always. But yeah, man, what is normal anymore in the NFT world and Web3 world? I think we all have people who onboard us into understanding like different use cases or different types of projects that are out there. I mean, look, I was thinking about some stuff this morning. I was listening to your previous podcast, and I was just like, this really is a crazy world. Like, on one hand, I'm like, yes, I got my Starbucks stamp. I'm about to get my next Starbucks stamp with one more, just bring in my refillable refillable cup. Then a money printer is going blur, but not for me. Then I'm burning some bears and leveling up to like level 2 of the killer bears. And then you got the Dookie sewer pass things. One's just listed for nearly $4 million if you look at current ether prices and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff going on out there, which to be honest, man, makes me super bullish. It's getting some people who are in this space, who have been here, a little bit more excited about things, and hopefully it'll open some things up as you and I kind of jam out and talk about the music, the art, and a whole bunch of the stuff that the blockchain has to offer. And hopefully it'll excite some people.
Yeah, it's such a good point of view, right? And it is funny just thinking about how random and different everything can be, right? Like, and just even the podcast, the people that we've interviewed on the podcast, right? Like from Flyfish Club, who you connected us with, right? Like to Spotty Wi-Fi, who we just had an additional drop. To also then we have like a tequila company, and then we had I just did a partnership with Guild of the Guardians, a mobile playing app. I have later on, probably one of the next episodes, will be with a project that is focusing on bringing education and clean water to Africa. And just it's such a breadth. But I think for this episode, one of the things for me that we often talk like from a project founder perspective, or we talk about it from like a holistic perspective. But I wanted to think about it. You're a big fan of a lot of music NFTs. But there are a lot of people that are like, hey, there's not a lot of great ways for me to listen to this music that I buy, right? When you and I have talked about that previously. And there are also people that are like, wait a second, I'm paying $75, $145. Like some of those people used to complain about spending $20 on a CD. They would have 12 songs. We only usually liked one song, and we spent $20 on it. So I'm curious for you as a collector, how are you looking at it from a standpoint of collecting and buying? Let's start with music NFTs. Both of us hold a lot of similar, probably almost all of a lot of this exact same ones. But I'd love to hear your take on like when you first thought of music NFTs, what was like the aha as a collector, and then what has you buying maybe the second version or the third version of different music NFTs that are out there? I think that's a fun way to get people's kind of minds wrapped around it.
Music NFTs have a multifaceted sort of approach to it. So as a collector, It wasn't one of the very first things that brought me into the NFT world, but it was something that has kept me in the NFT world, especially if I'm not looking really to spend as much money, or to move things around during a bear market, starting my own brand with Tyler Vaughn, our Vaughn Go now, our artist, and with you and Selly and all the things that I have planned. One of the things that's kept me excited are the music NFTs. So you mentioned, like, we complained about spending $20 on a CD. So if I complained about spending $20 on a CD, I might still have spent $200 to go see that artist live in concert. So what's the difference there? Why would is it about the money, or is it about the experience? So there's a couple things in place there, right? One thing that I specifically found that turned me off to spending so much money on CD. I mean, look, I had plenty of tapes. Remember tapes?
Oh yeah, the
Uh,
B side, right? Flip it to the B side, right? Or rewind it with your pencil when we were in class. Oh yeah, I'm a tape fan.
Yeah, and I remember even there was like, buy these three singles, three tape singles,
Oh yeah.
for like 9.99, and we had the wall was where we bought it.
I don't
But
know why, but Paula Abdul's tape came to my mind, which I'm not even sure I should have openly admit that, but like I can picture her tape cover. It's funny. I can picture hers and Arrested Development. Like
yeah,
those are two tapes that I know for a fact that I own. And I think it was like one of those, like I owned like Tennessee by Arrested Development. And like, I just bought the single. Right. And it's funny because like you brought up like even just like that. Like, I mean, I was a DJ at a skating rink, and part of my job was Tuesday mornings at 10 a.m. I would go to the mall, wait in front of the CD place to roll the gate up in the mall. And for those that don't know what a mall is, I know most of you don't know what that is. Um, and then I would buy like the Tuesday morning drops, right? Like, and almost all of them were a bunch of CDs that had one hitters on it, right? Like, and we had like the zip drives for a while, but like, but man, you just hit that point on like, and I'm gonna let you finish like where you're going, but like as soon as you said like I've been to 50 plus Dave Matthews Band's concerts, right? I own all of his CDs. Like, why the hell would I spend? I fly. I've flown to Seattle, flown to Colorado. I've flown all over to watch Dave Matthews, and he plays the same damn music that I was already on the CD. And in some cases, like some bands are great live. I think Dave Matthews is one of the very best, top of the top. Other bands aren't actually as amazing live, but it's fun to listen with others. But when you said that, I was like, man, there is such a gap because I've easily spent probably $20,000 going to Dave Matthews Band's concerts over the years. Yet I've only probably spent $300 on CDs in that sense. Wow, it's such a aha moment. Yeah, go ahead, continue on that note.
well, I mean, think about it. Most people spend less on an artist than that. I think you and I just
Right.
spoke with Spotty recently, and if anybody out there doesn't know Spotty, just listen to any of the conversations Fanzo and I have ever had, because we always bring him up as a great use case, not just in music, but somebody who really like understands how to give back to their holders, especially Genesis holders. Whole lot of things going on there with live access and claiming like records and merchandise and stuff like that. But it all goes back to that question you asked me. Like, the $20 that we would spend did not go to the artist. The $20 that we spend, what, $19 and something cents, would not go to the artist of that $20. So I remember being a kid, and those things didn't dawn on me, right? When you're little, you just
Yeah,
you
not at
just
all.
you know you're just happy to go to the mall. Maybe you got an A on a test, or a B
Yep.
plus, depending on type of kid you were, and maybe like you got $10 and you saved up for like the month, and you go out. And I
Thank God my
remember.
parents weren't rewarding for A's. I would have had no CDs. My parents rewarded for a little bit lower grades.
Yeah. Well, we all had target behaviors that we were going for. But I think in that conversation, right? I remember reading an article. And the first one I remember reading, I, I'm sure I read some before, but the first one I remember reading was about TLC, right? The R&B group from the 90s. And I remember reading how the three of them split like whatever, like a fraction of a percent, or like maybe 1%, or whatever, it was some crazy low number, with for their for the sales of their things. And like, as time went on, you hear about the Web2 streaming platforms, which give a lot of us access, but we're realizing, wow, like, for how many thousands or how many millions of streams is is not buying this artist even a sandwich? Like, is this person able to pay the rent with it? The answer is no, right? So
Right.
if music has an impact on you, or art has an impact on you, the way that music has had an impact on me, then, you know, I think to some degree, like at different points in my life, and you and I chatted about this a couple times, like music kind of saved my life in certain points,
Hmm.
like pulling on the Bob Marley, you know, and even like growing up, there were different elements, different things. Music for us really, there's a lot of memories tied to it, but there's also it helps us heal. It helps us when we're in pain. It helps us when we're angry. It helps us even when we're happy. And imagine the moments in life where there wasn't any music.
Mm.
Uh, imagine those moments, those moments in life, right? The birthday parties, the long drives in the car, all of those things. Imagine if those artists did not exist, right?
Yep.
And what was happening was we were starting to see a lot of those artists were not getting paid, and some of them kind of stopped existing as artists. So
Hmm.
I made a point to see more live artists. Like, even if, you know, you people might think like you're overpaying for a concert ticket if you want to have a great seat, like whatever, but that's that's their profession, like that's their career. Like, we all want to get paid for our work, but now we have an opportunity to support the artists where like most of the money, or you know, however they do their splits from their contract, right? Producer, guest spots, whatever. We're able to support the artist in a very real way. And what's really cool is that they see us now, like they see us supporting them. They see through the blockchain who their holders are, and they could give, you know, great things back to us. They could give us access to another NFT. They could give us access to a show. And, you know, and we're a part of this career with them. We're part of this thing. So, you know, you mentioned OAR. You know, I saw them over the summer actually with Dispatch and G Love, and that actually
Dispatch.
led.
Oh man, those all three. I've seen all three of them in concert, and I love all three of those individually. That I was so jealous when you texted me that you were at that concert.
Well, what's even crazier about that? So I was texting you, right, from my wife and I were just chilling in the parking lot, like we were having our own debate over like who's the bigger band? Is it, you know, Dispatch or is it OAR? And then you were like, well, popularity wise is one, but musically used in. So there's a lot of fun things you can do with it, right? But had you been on the ride with them from the very beginning, you would have a lot of ways to prove to your friends, we know you're a futurist, right? But like, I've been a musical futurist, and all of my friends joked. They was just like, Travie, like, hey, have you ever heard of this band Revolution? Like, I think they're gonna be pretty big one day. I'm like, bro, I've been listening to Revolution since like 2008 or nine or whatever. And it's just one of those things. It's just like I don't need to prove to you anymore because now the blockchain can prove to you. But what was really funny actually about that concert was I had a chance to meet G Love, and we were just chatting about NFTs because Jay Alders, who's a fine artist from my neck of the woods, he and G Love collaborated on some things. And like a couple weeks later, G Love wound up on my podcast because he was putting out a music NFT, and it just like kept on growing. And I just think it's a way for us to, you know, think how much money people spend on Amazon on things that they're, you know, who knows the things that we're spending money on these days. But
Yeah.
what I really like about it is we're able to support people in a very real way. And those are all kind of part of those things that started bubbling up the idea for, you know, the eventual creation of the journey. But there's a whole lot that goes into music NFTs besides playing the music. And now that you've got some of the sound things that we've talked about with Spotty, with what Sound.xyz is going to be doing, it's going to kind of be more of like an app where you can actually play the music from, instead of just having to toggle through your OpenSea. So there's a lot of advancements that are being made through that. But now you get to own it, you get to trade it, you get to collect it, prove you were there, and claim a whole bunch of cool stuff along the way.
Yeah, I think that's such a, I mean, I love the idea of saying like I was there at the beginning, right? And I mean, I've said this example a bajillion times on this podcast, but I mean, when I log into the warehouse for Dave Matthews, it says member since 2002. It literally says at the very top, and it has my member ID. And like I take pride in that. Like every year when that membership due comes, like I haven't seen Dave Matthews in 3 years, right? Or 4 years, 3 years. But I still pay my I think it's 199 or 149 a year for my membership access, right? It gives me a little bit of discount on merch, a little bit of discount on, I get tickets ahead of everybody else because everything sells out so damn quick. But like, I don't get, I mean, I get preferential, quote unquote, preferential treatment, earlier access based on the year you started. but like there's no like marketplace for like reselling and like, and I don't want to like make it about the money side, but like it's always something that people are like, well, Brian, like you get the music, but then like, are you selling it? Like, how does all that work? And I think it's important to be like, if you get a CD that you love, you're not looking at that CD saying it's only valuable if I can eventually resell that to somebody else, right? Like, and we grew up in the Napster space. Like I was on the other side of the extreme. Like I was ripping off every musician that existed. It was my first entrepreneur job ever. Was being, selling CDs out of my dorm room in 1999, and I'll say like, so like I love the idea that says like, hey, I can own this and say that I was there, right? Because let's face it, if you had an NFT and saw Metallica the first 2 years that they came out, right? If you, like one of the bands I remember seeing, one of their first concerts ever was Steel Pulse, a reggae band that, and I remember, and I remember it so clearly that we of course we were down at the boathouse in Virginia Beach. There was more smoke in that place than there was anything else. And then we were hanging out in the parking lot, and I watched the guys walk out the back of the boathouse at like 3 a.m. I don't remember how old I was. I might have been like 17. I probably told my parents I was staying at a friend's house or something. And then I met like the band, and they were there. And I remember them saying like they were all sharing a room at a Holiday Inn. And I was like, dude, like that's not a really good Holiday Inn in Norfolk. Like I was like, I know where. And I remember it like hitting me because you mentioned like, I mean, at that age, I didn't care how much the artist got. Like if I could rip a CD, if I could, someone could give me we were dubbing tapes, right? Like holding down the record buttons on the boom boxes to dub a tape. But I remember feeling like, wait a second, like these dudes just killed it, gave me an experience for 2 hours. Their music is in my ear holes on a regular basis. And yet they can't even, like they had a state of Holiday Inn that I would not have like recommended. And I remember that moment being like, man. And so like, I remember like, to your point, I went and bought their album. Like the next, like, I mean, I think I owned every CD of theirs because every time my head was like, I just want to buy the rest of them. Even if I don't like the rest of their music, it was that first one. But then on top of it, like the idea of like ownership in that way, right? There's the other version of this to be like, hey, what else can they build on there, right? And Sammy Arriaga, who we had on the podcast, Spotty, who we had on the podcast, Violetta, who we had on the podcast, and they've also been on your podcast as well. We'll link your podcast in the show notes because I think I love just hearing the artist approach. But like Sammy and Violetta were both quitting, music until and then they were able, they have millions of streams on Spotify, yet selling NFTs for one day, they made more money off of that, right? Spotty, he wasn't going to quit. He did quit, right? He went and worked the 9 to 5. And it wasn't until NFTs unlocked the idea, like, wait a second, maybe I could do this again full time. And now he's got shout outs and one with Snoop Dogg, right? Like, I mean, like, holy hell. But I also think of this in that idea of like, not only logging, like, where were you at and like what you own, but like, I was thinking about it, both of us love being dads, right? And this idea of like passing down. And I was joking with my daughters the other day. They were like, Dad, most dads of their friends don't want to listen to Taylor Swift in the car on repeat. And I am 1,000% okay with that because I am a Swiftie at heart. And I looked at my daughters and I was like, just so you know, I despise the Beach Boys. Not because of the Beach Boys I despise, but because my dad, that's the only, like my dad refused to play any, like he would not play Vanilla Ice. He would not play Wu-Tang. I remember he found Wu-Tang in the CD player of his car one time because I had driven it when I was 16. And all of a sudden out the window, I was like, Dad, what was that? And he was like, that crap music that was just in your thing. And like Wu-Tang, like the Forever Double CD, one of them went right out the window. My dad was like, you are not listening to that garbage.
I'm shedding a tear. Beach Boys and Wu-Tang are just two of America's national treasures, Fanzo.
I mean, and I mean, right there the same, right? And like, but the funny thing about that was like being able to say like, hey, I was there or I was supported. And we talked about this like in when this episode with Jordash, right? Like he said he went to the concert with The Weeknd, and he's like, his proof of it is like a selfie with him with his like peace sign, like, what's up? But how cool would it be that we can have a catalog of artists that we support, those that we like kind of belong to. And I tie it a little bit to like American Idol, which is a weird segue in that conversation. But like, I love American Idol artists because I got to find their story. I got to vote them to be like who they are. And let's face it, none of them probably would have ever been anything if it wasn't for that show. And let's face it, I mean, we have the Carrie Underwoods, the Kelly Clarkson, the Ruben Studdard. I mean, Philip Phillips. I mean, I can name. I mean, the amount of music that I listened to that came from American Idol, and in a way, like I actually tie artist NFTs to like kind of the American Idol with actually like the financial component, right? Like being able to now be along there. And I know like Violetta, if you hold a certain amount of hers, you get access to a concert. I know if you own a couple of Sammys, you get a free show every Sunday. I mean, think about all of your favorite bands, anyone that's listening to this. Imagine if they were giving free shows and Zoom calls and this access. So I love that you kind of tied that in. Now I am curious when you're looking at buying like a second NFT of an artist, or shout out to Violetta, who this episode will come out on the day that her next album drops, and we both have big pieces on her equation. But like one of us, part of us wants to be like, we want to empower creators to do what creators do best, create. At the same time, we're like, it would be nice that if I got some benefits, some bennies for holding multiple NFTs, right? Like when I open my music NFT library on OpenSea, I think I now have like 14 music NFTs, which very proud to have that catalog. But there is something to be said about like it's cool to own one, but like how are people building on it? So how are you, as someone that I heard your interview with Spotty, I shared the stage with you, and I loved your appreciation for his craft. I mean, you knew you were talking to him about certain certain lines, certain riffs in his song, and like it was just such a cool moment. But how are you looking at like continuing to buy an artist a second one, and how should people right now look at like if they don't own the original NFT that a musician dropped, should they own a collab? Should they buy the lower entry point? How are you identifying like where you want to continue to support artists in like kind of NFT space?
It's a good question. There's a lot of ways you can support an artist in the NFT space. I think that the artists that we've mentioned so far, I've seen almost like a menu, almost like a flow chart of things that you could do to gamify your tokens that you collect. So that's a way that they keep it interesting. I'm a little different than, than a lot of other people. I I like the gamification as a concept. I've been kind of doing it a little bit more, the burning and the claiming and that stuff, but that wasn't really something that excited me on a personal level. But I understand how it excites a lot of collectors out there, which is why we're implementing some of that in with the journey as well. But if you look at Spotty's website, right, he shows on there if you collect a certain amount of the singles, then you could redeem them for an entire album, right? Or a physical album, right? Sammy on his has an entire menu where you could have like a certain amount of types of songs or certain traits. And some of them you can collect multiple of, and that'll unlock additional utility. He's also got something called the Pulse Pass that when you pair it up, it's kind of like the key to unlocking the utility. So Sammy's got, so many different versions of Pixelated that if you collect multiple versions of it, that'll give you access to X, Y, or Z, right? And some of that does include like private concerts, right? Zoom concerts and that kind of stuff. And same with Ray. Ray Isla with her rock collection. There's different hands in the picture, so some of those hands unlock different utility. Then if you've got a certain amount of the different song titles, that'll unlock other utility. There's frames that'll go around the edges of each of the tokens. So if you collect a certain amount of frames, that unlocks additional utility. There's a lot that these artists are doing to try to make it fun for the holders, but and maximize the reason for people to continue to collect. But for me, like I think there's a couple things that you can do if you're a collector. But I do think you should, if there's somebody that you really support, you should try to get involved with their Genesis token. You could certainly support them by picking up one of their later pieces. But I think that being a part of the ride from the beginning is not only a great way to prove that you were there, but it's a great way for that artist to prove that you were there. So when they're continuing to do drops and things like that, yes, a lot of them do like to give certain access or maybe like spin the wheel and see like which of the token IDs win this particular prize that we're giving out, merch or another NFT. But what you primarily will see, and V's doing this too, if you've got one of her originals, you're getting an airdrop of the new song. That's or then so something some I think there's 5 songs on her new EP. So I highly recommend if there's someone that you believe in, getting their Genesis collection. I'm the theme song Fired Up on the Blockchain with Travie. I've talked about this before. Nax is a great producer, and by owning one of those for I think it's like 0.03 or something like that on I am Nax dot XYZ, you could get an airdrop of a new song at least once a month. So there's a whole lot of things out there, Fanzo, that people have access to if they're collecting music NFTs. And I know you just stepped away, so I'm just
No, no,
continuing to talk.
I was listening. Like that's what happens when DoorDash actually is faster than you expect them to be. Your food gets here
That's a
during a
good
podcast.
problem.
Anyhow, but like the other part of that you said, right? Like for me, the gamification I love, right? And my first NFT that was a music NFT, actually the first NFT I ever tweeted and said, wow, I can see the value, was actually Timberland's ape shit one. Because I remember buying it and it was like 0.2 ETH, which doesn't sound much, but this is 0.2 ETH in August of 2021 when ETH was 4K. So this was, I remember being like, holy hell, but it was going to unlock additional songs and albums and collabs. They had a list of them, but it gave me the commercial rights to use it in anything that was mine, like full rights. And like, I know that they've kind of, other projects have kind of adjusted, and because like that was probably a little bit too much. And unfortunately, like that project, they haven't dropped additional NFTs or collabs like after they the Ape in production drop. But I've used the music here on the podcast. I've actually included a little bit in one of my presentations, which I would have never been able to do. The other thing that I really like is the idea that like not only different versions of the song, but the art aspect of like, it's kind of like the album covers, right? Like for my daughters, I bought 2 of the Taylor Swift vinyls. But of course I bought 2 and there comes with 4 to make the whole clock. And it sold out before I could buy the other 2. And so of course now I'm looking on eBay to try to get 2 more for this ridiculous clock, which is going to cost me more than NFTs are. And all I'm going to get is a vinyl one where I don't even have a record player in the house at the moment. I used to, but we broke it. But it also reminded me like when I think of Moonshot, like that song by Violetta, which I absolutely love. My daughters love it. They'll request it in the song in the car. It's that art also like has meaning, right? Like I know her dad, bought it, and like it's funny because when OAR did their one of their albums, and actually when Dave Matthews Band did the Grugux Gang album, like that was actually a community art project. Like I remember that they like crowdsourced that, and it was like 2 different ones they combined together to make the Grugux album back in the day. And like that's also an element of this, right? Like we can tap into, with Pixelated, you get the, Sammy's pixelated art. I have the digital heart, one. We have the digital heart one in our collection as well. But that also ties into where I also wanted to kind of go this conversation from a collector perspective, because like one of one art, and I know like I'm looking behind you and there's pictures framed and photos, right? When I talk to people, like there are people that are listening to this podcast that will say, Brian, I love your AI art. Like it's freaking beautiful, but they don't see any reason to buy it, right? To own it digitally. Now, I will tell you, and this is the first time I'm kind of talking about this. I've reached out. I sent a very long email and a I wouldn't even say it's a petition. What would I would say I sent like a RFP to Mixed Tiles and said, hey, what if we could work out a deal that anyone that bought my AI art would automatically get the Mixed Tile be sent to their house, right? So like as soon as you bought my art, because that for me, part of it is like, I mean, I have it hanging, I have a couple of my pieces hanging above my head right now in like the small form. But like, I mean, I have someone that bought one of my pieces, actually the sunflower piece that's up above. Someone that bought that piece and they blew it up like poster board style, canvas. They put it on a canvas and it's hanging above their couch in their living room. And I was like, man, that's awesome. But there are a lot of people that are like, well, maybe they're like, I love that art, but I'm not hanging up somewhere. Or like, I love the art, but I'm not even sure where I would use it. Now you purchased one of my pieces, made it your podcast logo art, which I love you for that. I got a message from Justin. Shout out to Justin Lima, who messaged me yesterday or day before, and was like, "Hey, I'm going to put one of your pieces on a t-shirt. Dominic, who also is a collector of mine, mentioned that he's like, hey, I'm going to turn this into some merch. Like this logo means something to me. But I also think of it from like a one of one. Like now that I've owned a bunch of Sobbits pieces, the funny thing about it is I became the dude that I like was confused about in Web2 that would buy a bunch of art and they stuck it in a warehouse. And they never ever hung it up. And I was like, why the hell would you just own random art pieces that you never even look at? And so I want, for one, like right now on my wallpaper of my monitor that I'm looking at right now, I have one of the Sabbit pieces. My favorite Sabbit piece, Ali Sabbit, is now at my wallpaper on my thing, because I was like, dude, I own it, and like it's my I love the art. I'm curious how you're looking at that from like, I mean, you've bought into more art one-of-one art collections. And I will tell you, like, I love following you and who you amplify. I love how OG Collective celebrates artists. I love how the Journey is celebrating artists. But what is your whole take? Like, for those that are kind of confused on why the hell would I buy a digital art piece, even if I love the art, like they're like, well, then I got to print it out. And then if I print it out, is it like, and I sell the NFT, do I have to take down the printed art? Like there's like a real big disconnect there. Talk to me a little bit about like your affinity for one-of-one art and how you kind of looking at that whole space.
So you don't have to print it out. Let's put that on a record. If you've got some empty wall space and you want to fill it up, or you're tired of looking at some of the stuff you have, you can get an acrylic. You can get a whole ton of different ways. There's some great companies out there that specifically work to make your NFT, come to life to go on your wall. But you don't have to put it on your wall. You also, owning things digitally is what we are going to all be doing. Like you and I look at what, and your daughter's playing Roblox and stuff, and we see what happens with Fortnite, and even back to like the games on your cell phone, and even back on PS4, PS3, whatever. Like you're doing in-game purchases all the time. The only difference was if I purchased, I'm trying to think back, I had this conversation on a recent podcast. Because my wife doesn't let me play video games anymore because we got two babies. But when I was able to, I think one of the things I like to play was like those WWE, like the fighting games, right?
Uh-huh.
And so like if you bought the game, it's probably the same for like for FIFA and NBA and Madden and stuff like that. But I remember specifically with that game, you only had a certain amount of usable characters and a certain amount of arenas to play in, right? And over the course of the game, you can unlock it, or you could just do in-game purchases and unlock all of them. The only difference was, what if you wanted to play in another system? Like, what if you wanted to get the next version the next year? Like, I remember even going back and putting that game in a couple years after, and like all the stuff wasn't even like saved in there anymore. I was $64.99 just went right out the window. So the digital ownership component is something that, listen, that's not going to be going anywhere. That's only going to be continuing. I think the question that you're asking is in terms of the art and, how could we celebrate art and artists if we don't want to, create a metaverse gallery, or, if we're not looking at our open sea that much. So I'm going to take it one step forward, one step back, and then two step forwards to end the conversation about the music, but moving into the one-of-one art. In 2015, an album sold that was called Once Upon a Time in Shaolin. It was a Wu-Tang
Oh yeah.
album. Yeah, it sold for $2 million. There was only
Yep.
one of them, and it was physical. And
Yep.
it was in this, beautiful golden box, and
Yep.
somebody bought it, who then, eventually the government took it from that person, and that person ended up somewhere, um, you know,
Yeah, they're Guantanamo Bay or something.
well, I don't want to get into that side of things, but that in itself, like no one had heard the album. There was the only publicity about it was that it was the only one.
Mhm.
So that's what made it special, and that's why he spent $2 million on it, because of the fact that it was the only one. Now, was he looking at that as potential resaleability? I'm going to go ahead and say probably not. Now, that's what we have to look at the art and the music world right now that we're in, right? The DGen and the DGen plays, and when I say DGen is lovingly, because in my
Right.
podcast is friends and DGen. So we're
Right.
we're all we're all one here. But we're looking, that question that you asked me, and the fact that the people are asking that, um, a lot of them are thinking about it in terms of resaleability. Like,
Mhm.
is there going to be a market for it? Now, we don't know, and we can't bet on if there's going to be a market for it, but we are betting on the community that we're building around it. Now, I don't use the term community loosely, but you mentioned in the Web 2 space, like why do we buy art and keep it in a warehouse? Well, sometimes it's because you want to, rub elbows with other like-minded art collectors. And if I went into an art gallery and I purchased somebody's work, I I know in the back of my mind, like maybe it'll increase in value and I could like maybe one day have an auction house sell it or something like that. But I'm there to get to know more about the art, the artist, the other collectors, like have some champagne with them. Not to sound like whatever, but like
Yeah.
that's literally what we're doing in Web 3 with the art too. It's just, we're wearing hats and hoodies while we do it. So there's a lot of art and a lot of artists who have made their living already in Web 2, and now that they found the blockchain to show it in in a way that maybe a lot of them learned graphic design in the past, but they're fine tuning it through Procreate. They're fine tuning some 3D stuff with Blender, and there's a lot of reasons to continue to support art and artists. It's just a matter of, do you want to have a digital portfolio for yourself, and like, do you want to build that up, or do you want to support the art and the artist, or like you mentioned Sabit, like you can network with other people who are like-minded collectors, and there's a lot of value in that, man, because as you and I talked about in previous episodes here, you get a lot of value in the network, that this network effect that is created through the ownership and like-mindedness in these Web 3 communities. So, I think that there's something special in one of one art. I think that there's something special in not just feeling like the cool kid and owning the only one, but like surrounding ourselves by that art and by that community. Like the next, for example, like and I'll I'll stop with this rabbit hole. But Avril 15 is coming out with their season 3. They just finished a pre-allocation for that. Season 1 has a very high floor price. If you own a 1 and a season 2, you have access to season 3, or you could have won a season 3 pre-allocation, which is just like their way of getting involved in their allow list. But those are all going to be one of ones. So Tim and Nathan, they're making, I think it's like 350 one of ones. So it's not really a super generative collection. No shade to generative collections, but I just think there's different ways to look at the market. And unless somebody offered me a high sum of ETH for like an Avril piece that I have, like to me, the community that's built through the like-minded collectors and so many of these art appreciators, by holding an Avril, to me, is worth a lot more than somebody just like trying to give me some ETH to purchase the one I bought. So it really kind of depends what you're thinking. But yeah, I mean, you can see here I have framed art. It's not even on the wall right now. I'm like still trying to find places for things, and that's just how it goes. You just, life as a collector.
Yeah, and one of the things that I did, I've been trying to open my daughter's eyes to like the art, not only my art, but the art that I've purchased. I actually found that my smart TV, I have a Samsung, 60-inch TV. It has a wall, it has like their screensaver, right? Whenever it goes into screensaver, I uploaded and connected it to the art that I have, right? So I have a folder that's on my computer that it connects to. So every time like we hit pause on the computer, we walk away, it actually plays a lot of the art I own. And one of the things I tell my daughters, I'm like, I'm the only one that owns that exact piece, right? Or that one is a 1 of 11 and I own one of those 11, right? And there is something really kind of beautiful about that, right? And I also think, as we value websites and we start thinking about, what are the things that we own and like that we can take with us, right? Like the fact that, like I saw, Gregarious, one of our good buddies, he bought one of my pieces because he does which is really cool. He does a letter to his son every year. And the one that he bought from my collection was this heart one that he was talking about his heart and how he's approached life differently, and that piece like related to that and was like that means like so much to me, right? And we'll also say like kind of like music. I'm looking at my AI art right now, right, where I have a couple different collections going. Actually, I have a drop tonight on Known Origin into our Shades of ADHD collection. Like for me, the token of those are definitely going to unlock things, right? Like actually one of the things that I can probably say now, because it'll be out by the time the podcast comes out, is that like I have a really low entry NFT that I put up under the ADHD is piece. But what that's going to be is that's going to kind of be like people's like kind of raffle ticket to be able to buy a couple of other pieces. Like you can't buy a couple of these other pieces that I'm going to drop as one of ones, unless you have like this raffle ticket. Now the raffle ticket's like $14, but for me, it's actually the piece that matters, because like this piece, it's called Spin Cycle, and it like represents everything to me that ADHD is, which is like you feel like a superhero, but you also feel like you just got out of a washing machine half the time, right? Where like you don't know what up is down, and like your world is so different than like the world outside, and sometimes you're dizzy, sometimes you have clarity, whatever that may be. But I love that like I was laughing when you were like, because the network effect with digital ownership allows us to prove that we own it. The ability to prove that you own a bunch of art that's in some warehouse somewhere that's stored, that's a whole different, like you almost have to take people's word for it, right? Or like there's some like random picture of like the it's the actual authentication that you bought it. Like I mean, just like my dad with like sports cards, right? Like my dad has like on his phone a picture of like when he got the his Joe Montana rookie card, validated by one of the sports cards companies. He has like a picture of that, right? But it's not like actual ownership that can unlock things. And I do think this is a place where we're going to go in the future. When people do buy a lot of this art, it's going to have that digital twin. It's going to have that NFT piece. The other thing that I just want to point out, when I'm looking at the Mint 365 collection, they're the only projects, the only let's say the only vertical that is not less than what I bought it for is one of one art. I mean, I can say this boldly and 100%. I mean, one of the pieces is actually from one of our guests, Eric Paré and Kim Henry. We bought their piece. We bought one of their light photos for 0.2 ETH. I believe there was 20 in their whole collection. Each was one of one. To buy any of them, one I think just sold not too long ago for 1.8 ETH. Right. So like for me, that, and like this is from like I bought that, in June of last year, and now it's worth that. And the funny thing is, of all of the pieces in that Mint 365 collection, that might be the one that I'm going to hate seeing leave my wallet the most, because like I love like that one that I picked, this one photo, it really just represents a lot for me. It has like, it's this like door into a new universe. It feels very futuristic. It has like this like light behind Kim, who's the female in the space. And but like I love just the idea of like the supporting, the amplifying, the connecting. The last part I wanted to kind of tap on for this episode was there's also like the collaboration element of bringing all these worlds together. And I know that OG Collective, who we both are members of, does that well. The Journey is really focused on that, right? Where you're not only buying art, but you're working to make sure that you're funding art in the schools, but also bringing artists into the fold, right? You mentioned Tyler. Huge shout out to Tyler. I'm a huge fan of his for all of the work that he's done, right? We have the Van Goghs in our Mint 365 as well. So Tyler is in our collection. But talk to me a little bit about like when people like think about like, because you said network effect, right? And part of this is like, how do you grow a community? How do you provide authority and build trust in this space? And really online as whole. Part of it is bringing people together, connecting. Like I tell everybody, like the thing that makes me happier than anything is connecting great people with great people to do great shit. Like that's the thing that I love the most. It's like my favorite thing. It's like what gives me the most joy. And in a way, owning someone's NFT, owning their art, and then being able to connect them with someone else or connect them with your community or bring them into the fold is really a beautiful masterpiece, pun intended, that I don't think is actually talked about enough. So music and art NFTs, like the power for collaboration and unlocking new network, new communities is pretty wild, don't you think? Like that's like an unsung aspect of this that I just don't think is highlighted enough.
Right. So hashtag supporting artists means more than just supporting, a fine artist, right? There's all different kinds of artists that we can support, and that's one of the things that through the idea of the journey, the collaborations and the support of the artists are things that I truly care a lot about. I'm gonna drop alpha here just for the NFT 365 listeners because I've never done this before. The journey, I'll tell a little bit more about what it is and then a little bit more about how people could get involved with it if they haven't learned about it yet. But the idea that you gave earlier about American Idol and following somebody along their path, right? What I'm doing and planning to do with the journey, and especially as we scale through future partnerships and drops in those things, is kind of starting even before that American Idol piece, continuing on with the American Idol piece, and then supporting when they are, selling their music or their art in a more of a professional way. So I'll give you those three pieces together.
Yeah,
The
because I don't have
journey.
my
Mhm.
Carrie Underwood, Ruben Studdard. I don't have a relationship with them now, but I felt like I did through those first two early points. So I love that you're going down that path.
Yeah, so think about Ruben Studdard when he was young, or Carrie Underwood when she was young, Clay Aiken with with the theater when he was young, and imagine
Justin
if the
Guarini, shout out to Justin Guarini, who is a dear friend of mine now, who is American Idol as well, runner up number two.
absolutely, yeah, a lot of people had their money on him back
Yeah.
then too. So
Oh yeah, and he's up for he lives up in your neck of the woods. We should probably all three meet up sometime, but that's a whole side conversation.
that'd be cool. I have a feeling my wife would probably want to be present for that, but
Yeah,
um,
he is a beautiful human.
so imagine them, back in the day, if the programs were being cut from their schools that were, in relation to the theaters and the arts and the singing and stuff like that. Now, I've said this before, this is not happening everywhere, but having worked in the education system as a full-time teacher of kids with disabilities and behavioral disabilities, almost 2 decades, I saw a lot of things happen during that time. But I also worked with kids as a coach, as a camp counselor, as I worked at doing stuff through my town, special events. So like I started that whole journey when I was 13 years old. I'm not 13 years old anymore, but I've seen a lot of stuff change. And one of the things I saw change was post pandemic. We've seen a lot of things change during that time. A lot of kids were still learning from home, right? During for Zoom and Google Meet classes. And then we all went back. I actually went back to teach right after that as well. And I saw that so much of the onus was being put on this recovery of learning loss, that um, maybe, I'm sure a lot of kids did have some learning loss if they didn't show up at their Zoom classes, but it was assumed, like it's September of that school year, which is in Jersey, where the kids go back to school. It was assumed that there was learning loss, right? There wasn't even a state test to show if there was learning loss. So what they started to do was they started to move some of the funding around for the things that was very inspiring for the kids: the arts, music, theater. I don't even know. I don't even think we had a theater program anymore. And STEM was just kind of think. So I was thinking about it from the Web3 side. STEM is training the future devs. The music program are training, these future musicians, the Ruben Studdards, the Carrie Underwoods, right? The art programs, obviously, we've got a ton of amazing artists here. We mentioned Tyler and the Avril team and stuff. And I was thinking so much about it. Like, it started to really get on my nerves a little bit while I was still there. And then when I saw my own students like craving that outlet for that successful piece, when you have a learning disability in a way that a lot of the students I worked with did, I would support them. I'd have things in place for them. A lot of that stuff I had to do and pay for on my own to give them outlets for the creativity. But when I saw that, like, one specific kid, all he wanted was like an after school dance class. That's all he wanted to do. And then the next thing I knew, he just didn't want to come to school as often. And this is one specific, example, but in that area, it was a pretty dangerous area in the northern part of New Jersey. I'm not going to say towns, but it's in the inner city. So, there's a lot of gang affiliation stuff, and you kind of understand, okay, like that's kind of how the households are. That's how some of these households were run. And you kind of had to just be have some sort of affiliation with a lot of these. You're kind of born into it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So, there was something that that very next day, where this kid, all he wanted was an after school program. Something happened where they had just lost funding. That there something was going on with the some dance teacher, um, and the kid, instead of going straight home from school and didn't have a place to really have an outlet for anything, he got pulled into the streets, and he saw his. I don't this I'm just gonna put a warning out there. Just fast forward if you got your kids around. But he got pulled into the streets, and he was okay, but he saw his cousin get shot dead right there because he got picked up to go to be part of like the crew that was meeting up for this specific thing that I had been building. And like, this is the exact kid where I'm just like, I got to find programs for this kid. I have to find things for just a safe place for these kids to go. And then when they're old enough to make their own decisions and do things, people do what they have to do to provide for their families. So I'm not going there on a personal level, but as a teacher, your heart aches when you're teaching kids to read and they're having a hard time reading, and then when you know that they're being pulled into stuff in the street. So that's when I said, if I ever do something on the blockchain, it's going to be specifically with kids just like these kids that I've been working with, that I had in mind. And that's why the journey is such a powerful piece for my own personal journey. But really, I can't allow, that those kind of things to happen. When I'm looking at these kids and I see, wow, this kid has a great flair for fashion. This kid, all he wants to do is sing. This kid wants to dance. This kid wants to act. This kid maybe will be a dev one day because they like, I don't know, they love 3D printing or like whatever the kids were into. I saw so much a spark in these kids' eyes, and it just made me think of like these possibilities of, wow, if we could do something really amazing and use the blockchain to do it and show people out there that, NFTs could be used for good, where you got wallets splitting, going into a grant fund. You got wallets splitting going into an artist support fund. And I figured, you know what? Let's really create that journey for them. Let's allow these kids to take the first steps on their journey, start putting some money into that fund, team up with some people. They can add to that fund. We teamed up with a foundation. They're going to be putting more money into that fund as well. We'll be awarding our first grants coming up, hopefully in the spring, actually. And then we've got an artist support fund. And the thing for that is, obviously you and I are supporters of artists, right? But it really verifies to the kids, hey, look, these artists are doing their thing right now by selling their work on the blockchain. Like, the musicians out there and the artists out there are selling their work right now. Imagine if you stayed on the right path, right? Imagine if you had a program. Imagine if you had a place to go after school that wasn't being defunded, that you could really hone your craft, or even just find something you're excited about that'll keep you in school. So then maybe the thing you do eventually decide to do, the light will spark for you. And so it proves to them, I myself, Travie, and the Journey are investing in the first steps of their journey, but also putting our money where our mouth is and proving to them, you can do this. Look, we're literally spending money on it right now. So that's really the entire, like, that's what the journey is all about. But, you and I think about the collaboration piece. The journey is on the hug.xyz now. We're a part of the Disco Studios, which is an amazing, just like conglomerate of these beautiful one-of-one artists that I'm still taken aback that we were invited to be part of that. Some of my favorite one-of-one artists and some generative artists who do one-of-one work are all housed in the Disco Studios. They have their own Discord, and that's where the Journey NFT is housed. But what I think is really important for listeners out there is this: we're all going to be spending our ETH on things. You could be buying lots of music like we talked about, PFPs, you can buy art. There's a lot of things out there. What I want to do is really do all the fun stuff, the gamification, right? Maybe blending some traits, giving the merch, rewarding the Genesis holders. But so far, I haven't really publicized a way for a lot of people to get involved in the journey. And now that we're at a point where we have about 50 or so that we would like to sell before we completely close the mint. So I'm right now opening the mint specifically if anybody from the NFT 365 community wants to get one. Then not only that, we're going to gift you a thank you as a second one. So why is it cool to have two? Well, first of all, there's snapshots for holding one, holding one, more than one at different points, right? So there's going to be stuff that you're able to claim. Just brought on a couple new merch partners yesterday. Working some stuff out with a coffee company too. There's a lot of fun stuff. But I think what's going to be cool too is the idea of blending traits. And I don't want to kind of go on too long because I know that you probably have some questions and stuff. But I think the idea of having two that you could take a look at and say, wow, I really love the traits on this one. It's got a really cool hat or really cool bling, or like maybe the shirt's really cool, but it might look better on this guy. There might be an opportunity to say, I'm going to pick two traits, I'm going to swap them. And what that might allow is for somebody to build a little bit more of their, the beautiful piece that either they want to create for themselves, maybe hold forever. Maybe it might be something that they want to gift one to somebody else to allow them to have access to that community. Because, if as long as you hold a Genesis piece, you're always going to have access to the more stuff. And then, of course, there'll be other options and ways that it'll help you claim things for the future drops. But really, the gamification, man, like we talked about earlier, and the fun stuff that we want to do for holders and the claims and the merch and all that stuff, in the community survey I just gave out, man, the number one answer of why people want to be part of the Journey NFT is community. Like that had like a 4/5 average, right? Scattered was the art. How important is art to you? And also, kind of like also scattered, but a very similar average was the amount of tokens in the project. So that kind of tied for second. And a little bit lower was claiming merch and real life events. So I still want to give people the ability to be able to claim things, have access to things if they want it for them. But we all know the reason why the Journey exists, right? We know it exists to do these great things, support these artists, hashtag supporting artists, musicians, and get these kids started in the right way. So ogjourney.com is right now where you can mint. And I'm only going to keep it open for a few days. And that's really just for your listeners. Well, our listeners.
Love it, man. And I have to say, this is a little bit like pat myself on the back so that I can pat everyone else on the back. There are three. I'm consulting with. Currently, I think there's 6 projects total that I am an advisor on and working with, and 3 of them right now are just they're building and they're delivering value. And what you're doing with the Journey, Travie, I absolutely love. I love the idea of the swapping of the traits. I love the idea of a second one. For those that want to jump in, definitely jump in on that. And then we have Festival Pass, who, if you're in the Discord, if you hold 1093 NFT, you don't even have to buy the Festival Pass NFT, but if you want to, that's definitely an option. But you can actually connect your wallet to your account on the Festival Pass website and earn credits to buy music tickets, sporting events, go to Broadway. We have a whole announcement in our Discord, so you can check that out on that one. And then Galactic Gaylords, the other project, they just dropped their mint and their initial non-binary mint. And I have to say, those that have listened to the podcast, we've had Austin on, for a couple of episodes, bringing people on the Journey with the Galactic Gaylords. Their mint is out. Super excited, that people are jumping in. I know, Travie, you're jumping in with that one as well. But I think the piece of it that I love about all 3 of these projects that I'm bringing up, right, from Festival Pass to Galactic Gaylords to the Journey, is like all 3 of them, like it's great people with a great story, with a great mission, with ultimate value. And what I believe in is already proven trust of execution, proven trust of being in this space and delivering. I mean, Festival Pass, like, literally dropped their announcement of NFTs over a year ago. Austin approached me almost a year ago to like this month to say, like, Brian, I want to launch my own NFT project in the summer. Well, then we figured out that was like, hey, there's a lot of other moving parts, and it's almost a year later before he dropped it. Travie, you and I connected, thankfully at NFT NYC, and had that like hungover moment. We were already buds online, but we didn't get that, that real connection until we were hanging out in the lobby there, and then we got to, do that very hungover podcast episode, which turned into so much of our great friendship. And you've been delivering, showing up for people, supporting, and I just have to say, like, if we tie this whole thing in, right, like music, art, mission, social good, caring about good people. I mean, these are all great opportunities right now for people to get in, support, celebrate, even if you can't financially support, right? Like amplifying some of these, some of the content that's out there. And I will also say, for those that, in our community, we had to migrate off of the ADHD coin. We have the 1093 NFTs, which is, our initial perk for 1093 NFT holders being the Festival Pass, right? Like it's you don't have to own any other NFT. You hold the free 1093 NFT, which I gifted to our first 1,093 holders of the ADHD coin. And I'll be doing some additional giveaways of that. But it's also unlocked some collaborations, right? With things like what the Journey's doing and what Galactic Gaylords are doing. And I just have to say, like, Travie, I appreciate you doing that for, our community. Love having you as a co-host. And I'll just say for everyone that's out there, part of the other part of this that we have not mentioned is that when we talk about network effect, but there's something amazing about realizing that you are owning and holding NFTs that there are other people are holding that you respect in this space. Like, I'm just going to put this out there. If you go look at the Journey on OpenSea and then you click on activity and you scroll through the names on the wallets of the people that own that NFT, a lot of that, it is the who's who of people that I want to surround myself with in this damn space. And that is a beautiful kind of shortcut, beautiful map into this arena. So, Travie, this was a fun episode. I really love that we got to tie music, one-of-one art, our own little mission. We got a little, A-side, B-side tape in there as well. We also got to hear some alpha about the Journey. I love what you're doing with your podcast. Shout out to you as well. You've been able to use your network to reach out to some people that I don't have access to. And they're going to be future guests on the podcast. We have some really cool names of people that I'm going to make everybody wait to hear who they are, that have already locked in their space to be recording on the podcast. And a lot of them are because Travie's like, hey, Fanzo, I think this person would be great. I'm going to reach out. And so you are a shining example of like that network effect being beneficial for me, but it's being beneficial for everyone that's here, because Travie being a co-host is bringing us guests that ultimately everyone here will benefit from. And that's kind of what this is all about. So, Travie, I'll let you have kind of last words as we close out this episode.
And some of these guests are people that would have gotten me some more listeners as well. But what I realized too is, like, their story needs to be heard. The conversation that you're going to have with them, and hopefully, with myself as a co-host, we can get a lot more value for the listeners out there than just, hoping that they go over and subscribe to Fire It Up on the Blockchain with Travie. And it's a plug there. But you know what I mean? Like, think about it, man. Like, before we close up, like, what are we doing in Web3? Like, why is we greater than me? Like, why did I not start a podcast and call it the Angry Teacher Podcast? I started a podcast called Fire It Up on the Blockchain because we have to continue, like, and trust me, look, it's a lot more exhausting in the real world to be the nice guy. It's a lot easier to be the bad guy. Hey, just ask Ric Flair, just ask Hulk Hogan. Like, they loved being the bad guy because it was a lot more fun and a lot easier for them. And I just think we're at a point now where there's a lot of bad guys out there, right? And if we is greater than me, then that means that we're going to build together. We're building in public together. We're on Twitter Spaces together. I'm having calls with people who I absolutely love, that I never thought I'd be able to sit and have a conversation with them, right? Chat about the Journey, chat about putting a board of directors together for the Journey and where we're going to go with the grant programs and where we're going to go with the schools. And I'll leave you with this one last thing. If you go on ogjourney.com and you do support that, what I want you to realize is this: you're not buying an NFT for the sake of buying an NFT, hoping that it goes up in value and you're flipping it. You're buying an NFT that's being split into a wonderful grant fund that we are creating for these kids. Many of them were living in an inner city where a lot of things are not working in their favor. We're also creating a grant fund where some of the community members will be able to have a vote for when we do build our metaverse gallery. We talked about not everybody wants a metaverse gallery. Just come to the Journey's metaverse gallery and look at who we support. There's a lot of reasons out there that people buy NFTs. I just think that sometimes we could do some good, and we can use the blockchain to do it. And that's why I'm here, man. And that's why I'm always building. And that's why I'm always hitting you up in the text every day. And also, shout out Jordash. Congratulations on the Super Bowl. I don't know. I mean, you said the NFL or Super Bowl wasn't rigged, but I'm not even an Eagles fan. But the last 2 minutes, I'm sure some people might disagree with that.
Yeah, I know. Well, hey, but we have a Super Bowl champion as a previous guest of this podcast. Just shout out to Juju Smith-Schuster
Oh,
on that.
Juju.
Yeah, and I will say we're gonna put in the show notes the link to Fired Up on Blockchain. I love Travie's angle on a lot of his interviews and his approach to a lot of the guests that he's had, and he's had a lot of guests that we haven't had here on this podcast. So do me a favor, those listening, definitely go hit that and punch that subscribe button on your favorite app, and then do me one other solid, right? Like find the episode that you love and push that out there on social, right? It doesn't cost us any guai, any gas. It doesn't cost you $20 that it cost us for a CD. It doesn't cost us whatever it was, what, $12 or $8 for the cassette tapes that we were buying back in the day. It's simply just kind of celebrating the great people and the great things. And there's a lot of fun, Travie. Really enjoyed that we got to jam out a little bit. We've been doing a lot of co-interviewing together, but having this kind of opportunity for people to share and bleed in. And as I said at kind of the start of the show, if Travie's getting involved in a project, Drew, who of course producer on the back end here, Drew is turned into our resident DGen. So he's in projects. I'm like, okay, what is he flipping? If Travie's in projects, I'm like, what is he diamond handing? And I think that's just a testament to kind of what Travie is showing up and meaning in this space right now. And this was a lot of fun. So thanks everybody for checking it out. Definitely check out some of the links in the show notes. We'll have some links to those episodes that we mentioned. Also, we'll put a link for Violetta and her drop because she was one of our guests, and we want to celebrate them as well. So until next time, my friends, make it a great day. Cheers.